Get that child out of here before I call security. Jonathan Mitchell's voice cut through the air in the dining room like a sharp blade. At 45, the billionaire businessman was visibly irritated to find a 7-year-old girl sitting at his mahogany table, biting into a piece of chocolate cake. Little Sophia looked up curiously, still chewing. I just asked if I could have lunch with you because you looked lonely. Lonely? Jonathan laughed contemptuously. Girl, this table costs more than the house you live in. Go back to the kitchen where you belong. Vivian Washington appeared running at the door, her face distraught with panic. At 34, she had worked as a maid in the Mitchell mansion for almost 3 years, always keeping her daughter away from her employers. Today, due to a momentary lapse in attention, Sophia had escaped from the service area. Mr. Mitchell, I'm sorry, she ran away from the kitchen while Vivian began, but was interrupted by his abrupt hand gesture. I don't care about your excuses, he growled, his cold eyes fixed on the girl. I want this child off my property. Now. Sophia looked confusedly from her mother to the man in the expensive suit. Mommy, why is he angry? I just wanted to keep him company. Jonathan stood up abruptly, his intimidating height casting a shadow over the table. Because places like this are not for people like you. Your mother should have taught you that. What the arrogant millionaire didn't know was that Vivian Washington wasn't just another maid desperate for work. With a degree in business administration and a specialization in forensic accounting, she had lost her job at an auditing firm 2 years earlier, a victim of cutbacks that coincidentally affected only black employees. Accepting domestic work was a matter of survival, but it also became her perfect opportunity to observe much more than she should have. Vivian picked Sophia up, keeping her voice calm. Come on, sweetie. The gentleman is busy. Wait, Jonathan said, a cruel smile forming on his lips. Since your little girl wanted so badly to have lunch here, how about an appetizer of reality? He pointed to the leftovers on the plate. You can finish the leftovers. On the floor. Like an animal. The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia didn't fully understand the cruelty, but Vivian did. Every word was a calculated humiliation, every insult an attempt to break her dignity. But as Jonathan savored his display of power, he didn't notice the peculiar gleam in Vivian's eyes. It wasn't tears, it wasn't fear. It was something much more dangerous, the absolute serenity of someone who had just found their ultimate motivation. Thank you for the lesson, Mr. Mitchell, Vivian replied with a calmness that made something freeze in the air. Sophia, thank him for showing us exactly who he really is. As she left the room carrying her daughter, Vivian smiled, a smile Jonathan didn't see, but would soon discover had a very specific meaning. During months of quiet work, she had observed, noted, and documented things that would cause any businessman to lose sleep. If this story of humiliation and twists and turns touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happened next turned an underestimated maid into the worst nightmare of those who dared to humiliate her daughter. 3 days after the incident, Jonathan Mitchell was still savoring his show of power. During breakfast, he leafed through the financial pages of the newspaper with satisfaction, completely ignoring Vivian as she served the coffee. For him, the matter was closed. Another lesson taught to those who dared to step out of line. Ah, Vivian, he said without looking up from the newspaper. My mother is coming for lunch today. I want everything to be impeccable. And this time, his voice took on a sharp tone, keep your little girl well away from social gatherings. I don't want any embarrassment. Vivian nodded silently, but inside she registered every word. While Jonathan continued reading about the growth of his investments, she observed the details he considered irrelevant, the piles of documents left casually on the table, the phone calls he made without worrying about who was listening, the private conversations that took place right in front of the human furniture he thought she represented. What Jonathan didn't know was that Vivian Washington had spent 5 years auditing companies before losing her job. 5 years analyzing documents, identifying irregularities, tracking suspicious financial flows. And in the last 3 years, working from home, she had seen things that would make any forensic accountant salivate with excitement. Mr. Mitchell, she said carefully, I need to leave early today. Sophia has a doctor's appointment. He snorted irritably. A doctor's appointment? What kind of appointment could a child have that can't wait until the weekend? A psychologist's appointment, sir. She's been having nightmares since, Vivian paused deliberately. Since Saturday. Jonathan finally looked up, visibly annoyed. Nightmares? About what? She says she dreams about men yelling that she doesn't belong in nice places. She asks if it's true that some people are born to be treated like animals. Jonathan's discomfort was palpable, but instead of showing any remorse, his irritation only grew. That's ridiculous. You're creating unnecessary drama. He gestured impatiently, I just made the house rules clear. I understand perfectly, Mr. Mitchell. Sophia understands too. At that moment, Jonathan's cell phone rang. Mitchell speaking. What? What do you mean you've discovered discrepancies? I pay you to avoid exactly this kind of problem. Vivian continued setting the table, but her ears were on high alert. It was the third call of this kind she had heard in the last week. Something about tax audits, numbers not adding up, nervous investors. Take care of it. I don't care how, but fix it. Jonathan hung up abruptly and immediately dialed another number. Dr. Patterson? I need to transfer some funds to offshore accounts today. It's urgent. Vivian felt a thrill of excitement. Urgent transfers to offshore accounts during a tax audit? That wasn't just suspicious, it was practically a confession of financial crime happening right in front of her. Vivian! Jonathan suddenly yelled. Stop standing there listening to my private conversations. Go do something useful. Sorry, sir. I was just cleaning. Cleaning? You were eavesdropping. Maybe it's time to rethink your job here. Vivian felt her blood boil, but she kept her voice calm. As you wish. I can finish out the week and… No, he interrupted quickly. Jonathan knew that finding a reliable replacement would be complicated, especially with tax problems intensifying. Just be more discreet. And remember, maids who listen too much sometimes lose their jobs for just cause. No severance, no references. Understand? The threat hung in the air like toxic smoke. Vivian nodded, but something in her eyes flashed with an intensity that Jonathan couldn't interpret. I understand perfectly, Mr. Mitchell. You can trust my discretion. In the afternoon, while taking Sophia to the psychologist, Vivian reflected on the last 3 years. Every document she had accidentally seen, every conversation she had unintentionally overheard, every suspicious transfer she had witnessed. Everything was meticulously recorded in a notebook she kept hidden, not out of malice, but out of professional instinct. Once an auditor, always an auditor. Mommy, Sophia said in the back seat of the old car, is that man really bad? Why do you ask that, sweetheart? Because he yelled at you because of me. And you were sad. Vivian looked in the rearview mirror at her daughter's worried eyes. Sometimes, Sophia, people who have a lot of money think that gives them the right to mistreat those who have less. But they forget one important thing. What do they forget? That those who work quietly also observe quietly. And sometimes, Vivian smiled in a way that made Sophia feel strangely protected, sometimes those who observe know things that can change everything. That night, after putting Sophia to bed, Vivian opened her notebook for the 100th time. Pages and pages of notes about financial irregularities, compromising conversations, suspicious behavior patterns. It wasn't paranoia, it was professional documentation of crimes being committed right under the perpetrators' noses. She picked up the phone and hesitated for a moment before dialing a number she had saved years ago. Dr. James Carter? Yes? Who's calling? My name is Vivian Washington. We worked together at Anderson & Associates before the restructuring. Do you still work on corporate fraud cases? There was a pause on the other end. Vivian? Of course I remember you. You were one of the best auditors I ever knew. What a surprise to hear your voice. And yes, I still work on corporate fraud. Why? I need to talk to you about something sensitive. Something that might interest the FBI. The FBI? Vivian, where are you working? She glanced around the small room she shared with her daughter, then looked at the mansion across town where she had spent the last 3 years documenting crimes without realizing it. Dr. Carter, have you ever heard of Mitchell Holdings? The silence that followed spoke volumes. Vivian, are you telling me that? I'm saying that maybe it's time for some people to learn that underestimating maids can be the most expensive mistake of their lives. Can we meet tomorrow? As they scheduled the meeting, Vivian couldn't have imagined that across town, Jonathan Mitchell was having his worst night in years. The discrepancies the audit had found were just the tip of the iceberg, and he desperately needed no one to dig too deep into the investigation. What would never cross his mind was that the same little maid he had humiliated possessed exactly the skill set necessary to turn his life into a nightmare, and 3 years of evidence to make it happen. The next morning, Vivian woke up at 5 a.m. as usual, but this time with a completely different feeling in her chest. For the first time in 3 years, it wasn't just another quiet day at work, it was the beginning of something that would change everything. "Mom, you're different today," Sophia observed over breakfast, nibbling on her toast. "Your eyes are shining." Vivian smiled, smoothing her daughter's hair. "Sometimes, my love, when bad people think they're smarter than everyone else, they make very big mistakes. And those mistakes have consequences." Dr. James Carter had suggested they meet at a discreet cafe in the city center. Vivian arrived 15 minutes before the appointed time, carrying a discreet briefcase containing 3 years of meticulous observations. When she saw the gray-haired man enter the establishment, she immediately recognized the former colleague she had respected so much during her time at Anderson and Associates. "Vivian Washington," he said, smiling as he sat down. "You are exactly as I remembered. Determined and with that look of someone who does not accept injustice. Dr. Carter, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I know it must seem strange after so long." "Not strange at all. You were one of the most talented auditors I have ever met. When the company fired you in that restructuring that coincidentally only affected black employees, I knew they were losing gold because of pure prejudice." Vivian opened her briefcase carefully. "Well, maybe they lost more than they realized. Dr. Carter, for the past 3 years I've been working at the home of Jonathan Mitchell of Mitchell Holdings." Carter's eyes widened. "The same Jonathan Mitchell who is being investigated by the FBI for tax evasion and money laundering?" "The same. And I have reason to believe that I can substantially assist in that investigation." Over the next 2 hours, Vivian presented an arsenal of evidence that left Carter impressed. Exact dates of suspicious transfers, compromising phone conversations she had witnessed, patterns of behavior that indicated knowledge of illegal activities, and most importantly, documents that Jonathan had casually left on tables, thinking that the maid was just part of the furniture. "Vivian, this is a gold mine for the federal investigation. You've documented everything with the precision of a professional auditor." "Because I am a professional auditor, Dr. Carter. I'm only working as a maid out of necessity, not incompetence." Carter shook his head, visibly moved. "The irony is that their prejudice has completely blinded them. They put a financial crime expert inside his house and treated her as if she were invisible." "And there's more," Vivian continued. "Yesterday he threatened me directly when he realized I had heard too much. He said that maids who hear too much sometimes lose their jobs for just cause, without compensation or references. That's witness intimidation. He doesn't know it, but he just committed another crime." Carter picked up his phone. "Vivian, I need to connect you with federal agent Sandra Torres. She's leading the Mitchell investigation, and your evidence may be just what they need to close the case." Meanwhile, across town, Jonathan Mitchell was having what would be remembered as one of the worst mornings of his life. The 9 o'clock call was brutal. "Mr. Mitchell, federal investigators are requesting access to the bank records of the latest offshore accounts. Our contacts at the bank are nervous," his lawyer, Dr. Patterson, informed him. "Nervous?" Jonathan yelled into the phone. "I pay them a fortune to avoid this kind of problem. Sir, the investigation is intensifying. Perhaps it's time to consider a deal with the government." "A deal? A deal for what?" "I haven't committed any crime they can prove." What Jonathan didn't know was that at that very moment, 3 blocks away, Vivian Washington was providing federal authorities with enough evidence not only to prove the crimes, but to track every penny embezzled over the past 5 years. When Vivian returned to work that afternoon, she found Jonathan more arrogant and aggressive than ever. The pressure of the investigation was clearly affecting his temper, but instead of moderation, he chose to take out his frustration on someone he considered a harmless target. "Vivian," he yelled as soon as she walked in. "Where the hell have you been? It's 4 o'clock. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mitchell. Sophia had a doctor's appointment, as I mentioned yesterday." "Doctor's appointment," he repeated dismissively. "Every week it's a different excuse. Appointment, school, Some domestic drama. Maybe it's time you decided whether you want to be a maid or play devoted mother. Vivian took a deep breath, remembering the conversation she had had with Agent Torres an hour earlier. I understand your frustration, Mr. Mitchell. My frustration? Jonathan laughed bitterly. You have no idea how frustrated I am. Incompetent people everywhere, problems that shouldn't exist, and now I have to deal with a maid who thinks she can work flexible hours. Would you like me to resign? The question took Jonathan by surprise. For a moment, he almost said yes, but then reality hit him. In the last few days, with all the pressure of the investigation, the last thing he needed was to have to find and train a new maid. Besides, Vivian knew his routine, had access to the house, knew his schedule. Firing her now would mean bringing a stranger into the house at a delicate time. Don't be dramatic, he grumbled. Just do your job right and stop making excuses. Certainly, Mr. Mitchell. As she tidied up the rooms, Vivian allowed herself a discreet smile. Jonathan had no idea that every aggressive word, every display of arrogance, every insult was being carefully noted in a file that would be crucial to the federal case. Agent Torres had explained that establishing a pattern of hostile and discriminatory behavior would significantly strengthen the charges. That evening, after Jonathan left for a business dinner, Vivian received a call that changed everything. Vivian? This is Agent Torres. We reviewed the material you provided us today. It's impressive. We want to formalize your collaboration with the FBI. What exactly does that mean? It means you would officially become a federal informant. You would continue to work as usual, but now with our support and legal protection. Everything he says or does would be officially documented. Vivian looked around the mansion where she had been humiliated, where her daughter had been treated like an animal, where 3 years of honest work had been repaid with contempt and threats. Agent Torres, what exactly do you need from me? We need you to continue being exactly who you've been, observant, professional, and invisible to him. The difference is that now, every observation you make can help build a case that will ensure Jonathan Mitchell can never hurt anyone again. And my daughter? Would she be safe? Completely protected. In fact, Vivian, I want you to know that your work could result in the biggest corporate fraud and tax evasion case in recent years. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars embezzled. That night, as she put Sophia to bed, Vivian reflected on the irony of the situation. Jonathan Mitchell had spent 3 years treating her as if she were too stupid to understand what she saw, too deaf to comprehend what she heard, and too insignificant to pose any threat. His arrogance had been so absolute that he had committed crimes in front of her as if she were a piece of furniture. Now, that same arrogance would be the very tool that would destroy him completely. "Mommy," Sophia whispered in the dark, "are you going to keep working for that bad man?" Vivian smiled, kissing her daughter's forehead. "For a little while longer, my love. But now Mommy is no longer alone. There are very important people helping her. People who will make him pay for being bad. People who will ensure that justice is done, dear. And sometimes, justice comes in ways that bad people can never predict." The next morning, Vivian Washington woke up not as a humiliated maid, but as an undercover federal agent. The man who had tried to destroy her dignity had no idea that he had turned the woman he most underestimated in his life into the key to his own destruction. As she prepared Jonathan's breakfast, Vivian allowed herself to anticipate the moment when he would discover that the dumb little maid was, in fact, the most intelligent and dangerous person he had ever allowed into his home. For 3 years, he had played with fire, treating with contempt the very person who had the skills necessary to burn him to the ground. Now the fire was lit, and Jonathan Mitchell had no idea that his own ashes were already being prepared. The federal operation began at 6 o'clock on a rainy Tuesday morning. Vivian was making coffee when she heard the sound of cars pulling up to the mansion's entrance. Through the window, she saw federal agents getting out of black vehicles, wearing bulletproof vests and carrying boxes of evidence. Jonathan came downstairs in his bathrobe, annoyed by the noise. "Vivian, what the hell is going on out there? Why are there so many people on my property?" Before she could answer, the doorbell rang insistently. Jonathan walked to the door with characteristic arrogance, expecting to find some late employee or lost delivery person. What he saw on the other side left him paralyzed. "Jonathan Mitchell, I am Federal Agent Sandra Torres. We have a search and seizure warrant for this property and an arrest warrant against you for tax evasion, money laundering, and corporate fraud." Jonathan's face drained of color. This is a mistake. You can't. Yes, we can, sir. We have enough evidence to prosecute you for the next 20 years. Agent Torres entered, followed by a team of investigators. Your bank accounts have been frozen, your assets are under federal embargo, and your company is being audited right now. Jonathan looked around desperately, searching for something, anything he could use as an escape. His eyes found Vivian, who was watching everything with disturbing calm. "Vivian!" he shouted as if she could save him. "Call my lawyer. Now." "I'm afraid Dr. Patterson is also being questioned at this time," Agent Torres said. "We have evidence that he actively participated in the money laundering scheme." It was then that Jonathan began to realize the true extent of the situation. "How did you get so much evidence? My security systems are impenetrable, my operations were discreet." Agent Torres smiled coldly. "Mr. Mitchell, I would like to thank our primary source of information, who provided us with 3 years of meticulous documentation of your criminal activities." Jonathan frowned, confused. What source? No one had access. Actually, someone did have complete access. Agent Torres looked directly at Vivian. "Ms. Washington, thank you for your exemplary cooperation. Your documentation was instrumental in building this case." Jonathan's world collapsed in that moment. He looked at Vivian as if seeing her for the first time, his eyes widening in shock and growing horror. You're Vivian Washington, former forensic auditor specializing in corporate financial crimes," she replied with a dignity that hit him like a punch in the stomach. "I worked at Anderson and Associates before being laid off in a restructuring that coincidentally eliminated only black employees." Jonathan staggered, leaning against the wall. You spied on me. For 3 years you." "I observed," Vivian corrected. "I observed you commit crimes in front of me because you considered me too dumb to understand, too deaf to comprehend, and too insignificant to pose any threat." Agent Torres continued, "The evidence includes recordings of conversations about illegal transfers, photographs of confidential documents that you casually left on desks, detailed records of meetings where you discussed criminal activities, and most interestingly, your own confession about witness intimidation when you threatened Ms. Washington." "Intimidation of witnesses?" Jonathan stammered. "I never." "Sir, you are an employee. Your place is not at the dinner table," Vivian recited her own words back to him. "Employees who overhear too much sometimes lose their jobs for just cause, without severance or references. Remember." Reality finally hit him with full force. He had spent 3 years committing crimes in front of an expert at detecting exactly those crimes. He had treated with contempt and arrogance the only person in the world with the specific skills necessary to destroy him completely. "You did this for revenge," he accused desperately. "Because of what I said about your daughter." "I did it for justice," Vivian replied, her voice firm and controlled. "For all the people you've hurt over the years, for all the taxes you failed to pay while hospitals and schools ran out of resources, for all the families who lost their homes because you preferred to hide money in tax havens." Agent Torres approached with the handcuffs. "Jonathan Mitchell, you're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent." "Wait." Jonathan shouted, his voice breaking. "I can cooperate. I can return the money, I can." "You can do all that," Agent Torres agreed, "but from your lawyer in federal prison. Your accounts have already been frozen, and the government will recover every penny you stole." As he was led away in handcuffs, Jonathan looked at Vivian one last time. "Why didn't you give me a chance? Why didn't you confront me before? The same way you gave my daughter a chance when you told her she should eat on the floor like an animal?" Vivian replied, "The difference between us, Mr. Mitchell, is that I never said you didn't deserve basic human dignity. You chose this path yourself." Outside, a crowd of journalists was already forming. News of billionaire Jonathan Mitchell's arrest was being broadcast live, with details of the money laundering and tax evasion scheme that had moved tens of millions of dollars. "How does it feel to be the heroine who brought down one of the biggest corporate corruption schemes in recent years?" asked a reporter, holding the microphone out to Vivian. "I'm not a hero," she replied calmly. "I'm a mother who works hard to support her daughter, a skilled professional who has been underestimated due to prejudice, and a citizen who believes that crime should have consequences, regardless of the social status of those who commit them." On the TV screen inside the mansion, images showed Jonathan being placed in a federal police car. His company was in total collapse, stocks plummeting, investors panicking, employees being laid off en masse. The empire built on financial crimes was crumbling in real time. Vivian turned off the television and looked around the mansion where she had worked for 3 years. Where she had been treated as invisible, where her daughter had been humiliated, where her dignity had been constantly attacked. Now, that same house was being searched by federal agents, each room revealing more evidence of her former boss's crimes. Mrs. Washington, Agent Torres approached. On behalf of the FBI, I want to officially thank you. Your cooperation has resulted in the recovery of $47 million in unpaid taxes and the exposure of a corruption network that spanned 3 states. Agent Torres, may I ask a question? Of course. How did you know I had the qualifications necessary to understand what I was seeing? Agent Torres smiled. When Dr. Carter came to us saying that one of the best auditors he knew had information about Mitchell Holdings, we investigated your background. We discovered that you had been unfairly dismissed and that your specialty was precisely corporate financial crime. So you knew I had been placed in the perfect situation to observe crimes being committed by someone who considered you too invisible to pose any danger? Yes, we realized the irony. His prejudice created the perfect situation for his own destruction. As the agents continued their investigation, Vivian thought of Sophia, who was safe at school, unaware that her mother had just brought down an empire. She thought of all the times she had been treated as if she were too dumb to understand what she saw, too deaf to comprehend what she heard. Jonathan Mitchell had underestimated the wrong woman at the wrong time, and now he would face the consequences of a lifetime of arrogance and crime. But for Vivian, the greatest victory was not seeing her tormentor arrested. It was knowing that justice had prevailed not through revenge, but through carefully documented and courageously revealed truth. In the garden where Sophia had played while waiting for her mother, where she had innocently asked if she could have lunch with a man who treated her like an animal, flowers now grew that would forever bear witness to the day when underestimation became the most effective tool of destruction anyone could imagine. 6 months later, Vivian Washington sat in her new office as Chief Compliance Officer of the largest auditing firm in the state. Sophia, now 8, attended a private school where she was treated like the princess she always was. Jonathan Mitchell was serving 15 years in federal prison. His fortune was confiscated, his company went bankrupt, his former friends abandoned him. In his cell, he still wondered how he could have been so stupid as to commit crimes in front of an expert at detecting exactly those crimes. "Mommy," Sophia said, visiting the office. "Do you still remember that bad man?" "I do, sweetie. But now he can't hurt anyone anymore." Vivian smiled, looking out the window of the corporate penthouse. 3 years cleaning a criminal's bathrooms had prepared her to lead the fight against corporate corruption. The best revenge was not destroying Jonathan Mitchell, it was building something he could never imagine, a dignified life achieved through intelligence, not arrogance. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and share it with those who need to understand that underestimating people can be the most costly mistake in life.